Mabuhay! Welcome to Oral Communication in Context. It's a brand new day, a brand new chance to learn. I am your teacher for today. My name is Aslea B. Sarusong, applicant for Teacher 1 in the city of Davao. So set your mind, ready your heart, and brace yourselves as we explore the world of oral communication. In this lesson, we will talk about the barriers to communication. What are the different barriers to communication and how do these barriers cause communication breakdown? Let's figure them out all together. But before we begin, let's first have a recap. Previously, our lesson was all about the models of communication. Let us recall what they are all about through answering this activity. You are seeing a chart with 3 columns. Each column is labeled with the 3 models of communication: the linear model, the interactive model, and the transactional model. You have to copy this chart in your notebook. Are you done? Awesome! Now, you are to put the following phrases and statements in the correct column. This may also be found in your self-learning module on page 4. These are the phrases and statements. Letter A, Schramm model of communication. Letter B, the Shannon-Weaver model of communication. Letter C, a two-way communication process where feedback is given after a message is sent. We also have letter D, shows circular process between the sender and the receiver. Letter E, barriers affect the smooth flow of communication. Letter F, a one-way communication process. We also have letter G, having a job interview. Letter H, reciting a poem in front of the class. Letter I, presiding an important meeting. And letter J, focusing on the message sent. Are you done? Great! Let us check. For column A, under the linear model, we have letter B, Shannon-Weaver model of communication. Letter F, a one-way communication process. Letter H, reciting a poem in front of the class. Letter J, focusing on the message sent. Clearly, no feedback is required in all of these concepts. For column B, we have letter A, Schramm model of communication. Letter C, a two-way communication process where feedback is given after a message is sent. Letter G, having a job interview. As we can see, these concepts show that there are 2 people interacting. And for column C, under transactional model, we have letter D, shows circular process between the sender and the receiver. Letter E, barriers affect the smooth flow of communication. Letter I, presiding an important meeting. Now, these concepts display an active participation of people in a communication situation. Were you able to get all the answers? Awesome! Do you have any questions before we proceed? Great! Earlier, we just had a recap of our previous lesson, the models of communication. Now, let's discuss our new lesson. Let's start with this picture. Looking at the picture, do you remember the meaning of communication? Communication is a process of exchanging thoughts, ideas, and opinions in order to connect with other people. Was communication exemplified in this picture? I don't think so. What do you think caused the communication breakdown in this picture? That's correct. They can't understand each other's languages. Now, this is one of the barriers that we must avoid when communicating with others. You might be wondering, are there more barriers like this? Let us discuss the four categories of communication barriers. It is very important to recognize these barriers so we can avoid communication breakdown. In communication, we have what we call physical barrier. Physical barriers are the natural or environmental condition that act as a barrier in communication whenever we are sending our messages. Best examples are people talking too loud, noise from a construction site, loud sound of karaoke, and blaring of jeepney horns. Recognizing the barriers to effective communication is important in order to avoid communication breakdown. Now take a look at this picture. What do you think is the barrier in the given situation? Good job! That's correct. Clearly, the speaker is shy and nervous, and because of that, he is talking too low and he cannot keep eye contact. This is an example of psychological barriers. Psychological barriers are called as mental barriers. These refer to social and personal issue of the speaker towards communicating with others. Strong emotions hinder an individual to effectively communicate with others. Examples are trauma, shyness, lack of confidence, depression, fear, and stage fright. Another barrier to communication that may cause communication breakdown is our cultural barriers. Cultural barriers pertain to communication problems encountered by people regarding their intrinsic values, beliefs, and traditions in conflict with others. People's culture affect the way they communicate and relate to others. Best examples are different beliefs, different traditions and customs, different manners of dressing and speaking. But you have to remember that what is true to you may not be true to me and to others. Due to that, it may negatively affect the way they communicate and relate to one another. Lastly, we have linguistic barriers. Linguistic barriers pertain to conflicts with regard to language and word meanings, because words carry denotative and connotative meanings. They can sometimes cause confusion and misunderstanding. Meaning of words and symbols also vary depending on culture. The best examples are difference in language. Bon matin, buenos dias, good morning, magandang umaga, all of which mean one thing. Yet, if we do not know these languages, we will not be able to understand and respond correctly. Other factors that we should also take in consideration for linguistic barrier is accent and dialect, use of jargon and slang, speech defects, or language impairments. Now we have physical barriers, psychological barriers, cultural barriers, and linguistic barriers. However, Verderber 1991 gives a similar idea of barrier when he classifies noise into three kinds: external, internal, and semantic noises. What are these? External noises
are the sight, sound, and other stimuli that draw people's attention away from the intended meaning. For example, noise from vehicles, singing at the neighborhood, visual aids in front of the classroom, the dog barking, and the sound of airplane. Communication breakdown may occur when problems in any of the elements involved arise. Another is the internal noises, or can be considered as psychological and cultural barriers. These are the thoughts and feelings that interfere with meaning. For example, confrontation with a friend, fear of speaking in front of the class, and racial prejudice. And lastly, we have semantic noises. These are the alternate meanings aroused by a speaker's symbols. This idea means that a word may have another meaning in the minds of the students. This is affected by the language in which they grew and the culture in which they are exposed. For example, incorrect grammar, using excessive technical jargon, and using idiomatic expressions. And now, we are done with the discussion. We've talked about the barriers to communication and Vertibird's classification on noise.
Finally, it is time for an activity. You can open your self-learning module on page 8 as we answer this activity and what's more. You have to identify the kind of communication barrier exemplified by each description. Before we start, let's recall the 4 different barriers of communication. We have physical, psychological, cultural, and linguistic barriers. Are you ready to answer? Let's begin. Number 1, lack of confidence. Correct. Lack of confidence is a psychological barrier. This is caused by a person's fear of committing mistakes rooting from one's emotions. Number 2, connotative and denotative meaning. What's your answer? Correct. This is a linguistic barrier because connotation and denotation should be used in accordance to the context of the statement. If not used correctly, the meaning of the statement might be interpreted differently. Number 3, loud party. What's your answer? Awesome. That's correct. That is a physical barrier. This is an environmental condition that produces noise which may disrupt the successful flow of communication process. Next is number 4, different races. What's your answer? Correct. This is a cultural barrier. Different races have different beliefs and traditions which may cause understanding among communicators, thus leading to a communication breakdown. And number 5, poor lighting. That's correct. This is a physical barrier. Poor lighting as an environmental condition may cause communication breakdown due to the lack of communicators' ability to see the gesture and facial expression. Number 6, lack of attention and interest. What's your answer? That's correct. It's a psychological barrier. If the receiver loses interest and attention, the decoding process might not be achieved successfully, thus causing the communication process to fail. Let's go to number 7, different views and opinions. Correct. This is a cultural barrier. If the communicators do not share a mutual view and opinion, the tendency is that they might push their own ideas and fail to listen and understand others who think otherwise. Number 8. Using idiomatic expression. That's correct. This is a linguistic barrier. The use of idiomatic expressions may cause communication breakdown, for it is not certain that the receivers are familiar to the idioms being used. Number 9, information overload. This is a psychological barrier. Interest and attention are based on mental preference. And lastly, number 10, feeling frustrated. Correct. It's a psychological barrier. Frustration is a strong emotion that may affect a person's patience in listening and understanding others. Were you able to get all of the answers? Wonderful. For your assignment, open your self-learning module, page 8, and you will find activity number 2. There are 5 situations provided. You will explain why there is a communication breakdown on the given situations. And then, you will interview 3 people and ask them about a past communication breakdown they have experienced and what were the causes. You have to complete the table by answering the following questions. Who were the persons involved? What was the situation? When did the communication breakdown happen? What were the barriers to communication? And what happened due to the communication breakdown? We've finally reached the last part of our discussion for today. I would like to leave a quote. Do something today that your future self will thank you for. This has been Aslea B. Saruzang. Take care and stay safe.